The birth of early Norwegian black metal showed us many incredible bands and very interesting bands, at least so far, that we've already covered, such as Immortal, Mayhem, Emperor, Bathory, except they were from Sweden, and all that good shit. But we have one band that's very, very important to early Norwegian black metal for making very classic early albums. But like many bands that start out so strong, they go so terrible so quickly. Now, the formation of this band's very funny, like the band Opeth, because the band was started in like 1990 by a bunch of guys, and then the main members that are still there, Satyr and Frost, joined in later, and then everyone else got kicked out and fucking left. Before all the original band members would get kicked out, and it would just be Frost and Satyr for the rest of the band's discography, one of the original members, Lemmerchand or something like that, helped the other two record the band's very first album, one of the most awesomest black metal albums ever fucking made, bar none. An evil fusion of cold, sadistic black metal and incredible medieval atmosphere. We're talking about Dark Medieval Times. Dark Medieval Times came out in 1994, so this is after, Euronymous saved the black metal scene. And Satyricon were kind of late to the party, but at least they released such a great album, a symphonic black metal masterpiece. And around the time, Emperor was already paving the way with the idea of symphonic black metal, and Satyricon were kind of jumping in on that as well. And it was still fresh, it was still new, and it was still, without a doubt, good. The performance from everyone on this album is incredible. Satyr's vocals are on top form, his guitar riffs are incredible. But the best part of the band that everyone can agree on is Frost's drumming is always awesome. And the keyboard lines and all the weird folksy instruments are probably the coolest thing about this album. The medieval flair that Satyricon liked to occasionally use is at its absolute peak on this album. In fact, you could argue that they even show a little too much medieval flair on this album, but that's the charm of this album. It's everything that Bertram should be, and it's even progressive. I love how the album just starts with heavy thudding, what the fuck am I getting myself into? This shit sounds scary. And it just kicks into, of course, the crazy black metal blast beats, and you're in heaven. Or in this case, in hell. Some of the best songs on here are the epic Dark Medieval Time, which has some amazing folksy and medieval stuff throughout the song, especially in the middle section. Very little singing, a lot of crazy instrumentation. Sky Deggins is pretty fun, a rather short song with a great groove to it, but the absolute best song on the album is Into Thy Mighty Forest. But before we move on to a lesser album, we have to talk about the instrumental song. Now, the first three Satyricon albums are very, very high in quality, but the thing that I do not like about all three of them is they all feature an instrumental song on them that's rather pointless. In this case, we have My Tribute to the Winter Land. However, for a pointless instrumental, it's actually pretty dang cool for showing off a lot of cool melodic medieval guitar playing on the acoustic guitar. Very cool, very different, and for a useless-ass instrumental, it actually makes a nice spot in the middle of this album. The album's not perfect, but it's almost there, and easily the best album, most consistent album the band has ever released. And in that exact same year, they released the Shadowthrone, which everyone agrees is not as good as the album before and after it. And I agree, even though it is very, very good, it's just kind of the same as the other two, but not nearly as unique. And it's literally, sound-wise, in between both those sounds, the cool melodic atmosphere of medieval dark times and the crazy blasturbation of Nemesis Devina. Still a good album. I'd say that the instrumental at the end of it, in a Black Coffin, is easily the weakest, and probably out of these three albums that have the instrumental songs in them, that's the worst instrumental out of the three, completely pointless. And the cool song in here is Viking Land. Now let's move on to a black metal classic known as Nemesis Devina. Nemesis Devina came out in 1996, and it shows off an incredible, fast, and incredibly well produced, and incredibly intense transformation of the band. Instead of a lo-fi melodic direction, most of this album is actually pretty ferocious. And right from the intro of the album, where you hear a lot of bizarre sounds and like keyboard stuff, then all of a sudden, out of absolutely nowhere, in the dismal fog, you hear Satyr scream, "This is Armageddon!" And you know from that point on, this album is going to unwrestle your jimmies in all the best ways. The Dawn of a New Age, the first song, is actually my favorite Satyricon song, which is crazy because a lot of people say, "You idiot!" Mother North, the third track, is the best song on the album, the best song they ever made, the best black metal song. Fucking die, you stupid poser. But that is a great song too. It's just something so much better about that crazy riffage on the Dawn of a New Age. But back to Mother North though, there's some really awesome symphonics, very amazing melodic stuff to this song. Even though you could argue it sounds like a cheesy power metal song, they just make it work on this song. Another awesome song I'll talk about is the title track, Nemesis Devina. The riffing and rhythm of the song right off the bat is very, very weird. But then you go to that crazy down, and you know that you're in for something really special in this song. And we have another pointless instrumental on this album, Transcendental Requiem of Slaves. Completely pointless, and if this song was not on here, I would argue this is one of the absolute best black metal albums ever released. But everything has to be equally good, you know, to be like a 10 out of 10 awesome, amazing album. And we have a black mark here. It's pointless. It does nothing. But man, having a pointless instrumental that does nothing is much more enjoyable than what is to come. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare for the shortest retrospective to this point. Because what we're going to do is kill so many birds with one stone, or so many towers with one plane, that it's going to be unbelievable. Jeff Goldblum, please introduce the next line of Satyricon albums.
That is one big pile of shit.
We'll start with Rebel Extravaganza, where they completely lost their shit. The album cover already looks like a horrific new metal jump the fuck up girlfriend metal album. Right off the bat, I'm like, oh god, what have they done? But what's funny is it's not even musically like that. It's just black metal that's generic and watered down. The production sounds very weird. It doesn't sound like new metal, but it sounds completely vapid and lifeless, which is the perfect description of every album from this point on. And it's all vapid and it's all lifeless. However, I'd say this is the best out of all the albums to come, because at least it sounds like black metal, but it's just definitely terrible black metal. Now, there's two good songs worth checking out on it. Primeval Resistance, which has great riffs, and A Moment with Clarity, which is pretty well written. The rest is god-awful, and the worst songs are probably the 10-minute opener and closers, which just drag on with riffs that are horrible, with tremolo-picked riffs that aren't even remotely catchy. It's like they decided to write riffs that were completely unmemorable and riffs that had absolutely no hook to them. You have to write a black metal riff that at least has some sort of cool sound to it or something, but it's absolutely vapid. Some of those boring shit I've ever listened to. Then we have Volcano, and we get even worse. They decide to go for like a black and roll direction. They've completely lost their minds, Satyr and Frost. They're going into a midlife crisis. And then we get even worse. Now Diabolical is the absolute worst Satyricon album. I would argue that the self-titled is worse, but at least that has a good song on it. This has nothing at all. In fact, it even had a single with a music video that was absolutely cheesy beyond hell, showing the full transformation to a terrible black and roll band that goes for a terrible fucking chick rock, Hot Topic direction to try to get the chicks to like their shitty metal. Satyricon is good, King. That's a great song. It's not like it has a terrible riff, and then it's a horrible, horrible chorus that's not even remotely catchy, and it just sounds like Elvis Presley trying to do black metal. It's fucking good, man. An absolute abysmal 0 out of 10 one of the absolute top 2, I'd probably say, worst black metal albums I've ever heard. It is abysmal. In fact, you know what? It is the worst I've ever heard. At least Grand Declaration of War could be funny at points of how fucking outrageously stupid it was. But this is so boring, which really pains me about these albums, is that not only are they quality-wise god-awful, but they are boring in every single fucking way. Unredeemable. At least I can enjoy albums like Saint Anger because they're funny. At least I can enjoy albums like Cold Lake because they're so funny and cheesy. This has nothing. Age of Nero, slightly better, still the same shitty direction, but there are 2 good songs on it. Finally, we have at least 2 good songs for once. We have Die By My Hand and The Sign of Trident. However, there is one thing that I do like about this album, is that the production actually kind of sounds like a good black metal production, but musically it's more god-awful writing. They need to stop with this shit and go back to their old school sound, because that is the only thing that could possibly save them from this terrible, fucking pretentious direction this band is going in. And speaking of pretentious, that is some of the worst shit I've ever heard. I'm talking about the self-titled Satyricon album, the last one that they've recorded at this point. Hopefully it's the last one, unless they decide to actually write something worth a darn tootin' by going back to their old style. Absolutely fucking torturous. Every note of it except for one song. I already mentioned that it's got one good song. Let's talk about it. We have the song Walker Upon the Wind. This song is exactly what they should be doing. It's the best song they've ever written since fucking anything on Nemesis Devina. It's musically, and even some points production-wise, what they should be fucking doing, because it has the old school style that they were doing, the great fucking riffs, the great fucking melodies that they threw in there, and actually sound like they give a damn, and actually sounds like black metal. It sounds like Satyr, doesn't sound like a fucking croaking bitch. They did everything right on the song. The rest of it is boring as fuck. And I would argue that this is worse than Now Diabolical if it wasn't for that one song, because this is one of the most boring things I've ever listened to. And what makes it worse is the production. It sounds so thin and fake. It sounds like they recorded it in like a little grassy area, but it doesn't even have like a cool atmosphere to it. It just sounds dull. You know, recording it in a blizzard is one thing, but just recording it in like a boring grassy field, what are you going to get from that? That's what it literally sounds like. That's how fucking terribly thin it sounds. And there's just something about the way they mixed it too. It sounds fucking weird. But enough of that. That's that band's terrible, terrible discography. The only things worth a damn are the first 3, the best being Dark Medieval, then Nemesis Devina. I kind of personally like Nemesis Devina more. Then the Shadowthrone. And then you have all that other shit which you should avoid at all costs, and just make a compilation of the only good songs worth those albums. And hey, maybe you'd actually have another good Satyricon album. But even the best songs from all those fucking god-awful albums is still not even as good as the Shadowthrone. So fuck you, Satyricon. Go drink bleach, and I hope Varg kills you, you stupid, lazy pieces of shit.
Killing other human beings. Is it always a bad thing? Let's find